So thank you for coming to our show. So I know that you are a highly accomplished physicist and you spent most of your career at Oxford University. So could you tell us a little bit about your background and then what made you become so interested in nuclear physics or nuclear energy?
Well, of course, that's a very interesting question for me at my stage to look back and think, why did I do what I did? And I think that 200 years ago, somebody young looking to do something they would run away to sea. And but you can't really run away to sea and just explore the world like that these days. So I think I ran away to explore the universe, bit bigger. But none of my family went to university, so I was out on my own. They didn't know what I was doing, and that's like running away to sea. I think I wanted to know how nature works, not accepting anything by authority, but on what I found. And so I think I spent a lot of time understanding myself and not very much time getting to know the right people. Now, most people would think that was a bad idea, but I'm very glad that I did it this way. So I read natural sciences at Cambridge, and then I did something rather unusual. I did mathematics part 3 as a 4th year, and that's a very hard, interesting, demanding course. And then I went to Oxford and doing experiments in physics at CERN, and I spent most of my career at Oxford teaching mathematics, physics. I started a course on medical physics, sort of fascinating subject, and continually expanding my my knowledge and learning something new myself, often from my students.
That's very interesting. It seems like you are driven by curiosity about and you really want to know what nature is about, and then about the world we are living in. So why you choose like experimental physics rather than theoretical physics, and why you are so interested in nuclear physics in this particular field?
Oh, you're wrong. I spent much of my time on theoretical physics. That's why I read mathematics part 3, and I'm working on my 4th book now, which is almost entirely theoretical physics.
That's interesting.
But it won't be so popular or interesting to so many people.
So may I ask what's your 4th books will be about? Like, is for the general public or more for
Oh no, it's not for the general public at all. It's really my graduate lectures from 30 years ago, which I never really wrote up, and it's the understanding that I achieved on the motion of relativistic charged particles moving through matter. And I dare to think I understand more about that than anybody else, but I've never written it up properly. So I'm working on that book.
So I think for the general public, they probably don't understand that part you were doing, but they will be very interested in your position about nuclear energy, especially your position about you have a lot taught about radiation. So I think probably I can ask a question about that, about your position about that. That's what issue.
Well, everybody's frightened of radiation, and there's nothing scientific about that at all. and you suggested that people think that they have an idea about nuclear, but the problem is that the truth is they don't know anything about it, because our education system doesn't tell people about the nuclear world at all. All they know is they get from media headlines, and the media headlines, there's no science in that. But the nuclear world is part of the natural world. Nuclear physics was here long before we were, and before the Earth was formed, all the atoms, except hydrogen, all the atoms in our world that make us up and so on, were formed by nuclear reactions. We are all made of nuclear waste. And that was a very, very long time ago, but there are still some atoms which are radioactive from those days, and those are the uranium and thorium and radioactive potassium that we still have around us today. And every second, 7,000 atoms in your body decay, and that goes all the way back to before the Earth was formed. And in the old days, when life started about 3 billion years ago, the radiation levels were much higher. And if nuclear was really dangerous, we wouldn't be here. So the whole of biology, the whole of the design of biology, is quite different from physics. The whole of the design of biology is centered around making sure that we're okay. We're protected, we're vaccinated, if you like it, against the effects of nuclear radiation. And then in 1945, everybody discovers something which, as I say, has been going on for 3,000 million years. And they suddenly get frightened by it. So the fear is not justified. There are lots of things that we really should be worrying about that we're not vaccinated against: the virus, climate change, carbon fuels, the inadequacy of renewables, because they're incredibly weak, but I'll say a bit more about that in a minute, and as I said, the viruses. But nuclear, no problem at all.
So it seems that you have a very positive attitude about nuclear nuclear, because you think that's just part of nature. So our fear is somewhat unjustified.
Yes.
I have read your other speech and your writing. It seems to you that nuclear can be a solution for many problems, such as climate change. It somehow is not only not that harmful, but also it can bring positive impact to the society. Can you tell us more about that? Like how nuclear can make us live in a better world, and then how can it change those and help us to solve a lot of the social problem or the environmental problem?
Let's look at energy. People talk about energy, but how many people could actually tell me what energy is? And the first thing you learn as first year undergraduate on a physics course is that energy is conserved. You can't make it and you can't destroy it. It's here or it isn't here. And so if we're going to use energy, we've got to find, it's like gold. You can't make gold. If you want gold, you've got to find out where it is. So where is energy? Well, energy is in three places. There is the falling and blowing and moving objects that we see, a waterfall and a windmill going round, and we can see the energy. We can feel the wind on our face. That's very obviously the energy. And long ago, that's where all our energy came from. But it's very unreliable, and also it's incredibly weak. And that is why a renewable energy has to be absolutely, the plant has to be absolutely huge. You have to, for the Three Gorges Dam project in China, 1.3 million people and all the wildlife and so on had to be moved to make the flood. The same thing is true for solar panels. They cover the earth. And windmills, which is hundreds and hundreds of windmills. How can anybody possibly call that green? It destroys the environment. But it destroys it because the renewables are so weak. And then, of course, there's chemical energy. Well, you can't see that either. You look at a lump of coal, you only know that there's energy there because you've learned that if you burn the coal, it'll get very hot. But it's hidden. But it's much, much, much more. There's much more energy there, and it's reliable. So when the Industrial Revolution came, we had reliable energy, and it was fantastic. And in the Industrial Revolution, going all the way up, it's chemistry basically, going all the way up to electronics, which is also same sorts of energy. The population of the world has gone up by a factor of 4, a factor of 8. The lifetime, our life has doubled in length. Life has been transformed because we had a concentrated form of energy. And now, of course, we know that we overdid that, and you can't have carbon fossil fuels all the time because we're polluting the planet. But you can't go back to renewables. That's what we left behind. That's what didn't do the job when we had an appalling standard of living. People who reached the age of 30 were old. If they had children, that was the best that they could possibly hope for. And then there's nuclear. And actually, if you look at the physics of nuclear, the energy of nuclear is hidden inside the nucleus in exactly the same kind of way as chemical and electronic energy is hidden in the electronic atom, which is 100,000 times bigger. So it's hidden just as much as chemistry is, and it's very similar. I can go into second year quantum mechanics, but the explanation is terribly simple. It's all part of nature. And the bottom line is that if you want to look at all the energy that you need to use for your life, you could use 10 million tons of water coming over a 100-meter high dam. That would give you enough energy for your life. Or you could have 1,000 tons of coal. That's 10,000 times smaller. And apart from the fact that it makes a mess, that is a very good way, and it's given us our present standard of living. But nuclear, if you'd have just 1 kilogram, not 1,000, a millionth, which is 1 kilogram of nuclear fuel, is enough energy for the whole of your life. It's the contrast between those numbers that is why renewables are useless, and fossil fuels were a big help for the Industrial Revolution. But if you can't have that, you've got to go to nuclear. So it's not a question of what I think or what I like or what I believe. It's what's out there in the physics. And of course, it's very interesting, where did the nuclear energy come from? And the answer is the uranium and thorium and potassium were made in supernova explosions before the Earth was born. And you can see those in some places out in the universe today. So you can actually connect with things you can observe in astrophysics today.
Ah, that's very interesting, because people always have some very negative attitude toward nuclear. They always think nuclear is something unnatural. So nowadays, different countries also have different attitude toward nuclear energy. For example, France, they are more positive about this, but Germany seem to be scared of the radiation, that kind of stuff.
And what's happening? Can I stop you there?
Yeah,
What is happening now? For political reasons, German Green and environmentalists have persuaded France to turn its nuclear power stations off, which is absolutely crazy. There is one of the few nations in the world which, as you say, did understand about nuclear power, but their politics is now allowing them to start throwing it away. And that's very sad. It's got to be reversed.
So what do you think about like the current limit on radiation? You know, some country they say we can embrace nuclear energy, but we are put on some regulation, and then but you seem to you that the current limit on radiation seems like too much, and then probably government should take some change, and then to change their current regulation. So if that's the case, I mean, what direction should the government take, like besides embracing nuclear energy?
Well, what they've got to do is, they're all thinking about what we need is to build new kinds of power stations, or new kind of investing this, and something in the financial world where we make an investment or something. Actually, what's needed is education. People need to understand, because nuclear energy would be very cheap if all you really need is to know how to do it. Nuclear fuel is not very unusual. It's not very difficult or very expensive to make. You only need 1 kilogram of it for your whole of your life. And the waste it produces is very little of that too. So what we should be doing is investing in education, rather than looking at something which is about regulations and money and those sort of things. Regulations and money, those are two things that humans invented. We make the laws, the legal laws, and we make money. They're all inventions of humans. But what the important thing is, what's there in nature. Because if I could pick up something else that people talk about, they talk about science and technology as if that was all one, all the same thing. They're completely different. Science, natural science, is about the world out there that would be out there whether we're here or not. It's how the world works. And technology is very important, but it's what we do, mankind, does with it, which is not nearly so important, because you can't dig a gold mine to find gold if there isn't any gold there. So the important thing is to find out where the energy is, in this case, and then you know what kind of technology you should use. So I get very unhappy when people talk about science and technology as if it was all one thing.
So it seems that you think that the government should educate the new generation and tell them that nuclear energy is not something extremely dangerous. It's just part of our world. So do you think that that kind of education starts from like very early stage of a child, or like, for example, we should have that kind of education in, I don't know, primary school, middle school, or are you thinking that
Middle school.
educate them like, you also thinking in our higher education, we do not talk enough about nuclear energy, and that we do not educate those students that nuclear energy actually can do a lot for human beings?
We certainly don't have enough in the even in higher education. But I gave on the just at the end of January, before the virus took hold, I gave a lecture, a school lecture. But I wish I could be invited to give more school lectures and explain how the choices between these energies and the importance for life and the energy that we need and where it comes from. These things can be put in simple terms. Of course, if you actually want to build a nuclear power station, then you need a lot of people who can do the engineering and so on. But it's not, and there's a lot of it, but it's not expensive, except for the children who say, I want to be a nuclear engineer. They are the people who are making the investment, not people in the City of London. The people who need to make the investment are the children of tomorrow, who are going to say, I want to invest my life in building nuclear power stations. Those are the people we need. That's the kind of investment we need.
That's a very interesting way to say it. So do you still feel very optimistic about the nuclear energy research in the next 10 years? Because just as you just said, that you feel the country of France, they have been persuaded to turn off their station. So do you think in the next 10 years people will be willing to accept nuclear energy, or you just still thinking that the research on this sort of topic would not go really well, or would not have a groundbreaking work? So what do
you said research, that there's technical development to do, and that's important. It's not difficult, but some of it will take quite a long time, 10 or 15 years, and in the case of fusion power, probably 15 or 20 years. But that can be done. But there's no research in the sense of natural science. We know what we're talking about. It's been known for, Mary Curie knew most of it, and that was 120 years ago. And she was a great pioneer, and people are very pleased when nuclear is used for the benefit of their own health under the flag of Mary Curie. But if it's a power station, they're frightened of it, which is ridiculous.
So what about, like, I can imagine your opponent would say that, oh, look at those, like the nuclear accident happening in Japan, or what would you say to them? Do you think that that's just
stop the nuclear accident in Japan? Yes, there was an accident. Absolutely nobody died. In fact, nobody's health, physical health, medical health, was hurt at all. That's extraordinary. There were some physical explosions. I mean, blasts. The pressure vessel which the reactor was in could have exploded, which would have made a physical mess and might have killed people by blast. But there wasn't very much nuclear. There was no nuclear danger in there. In all my life, working at CERN, doing experiments with radiation and so on, the most serious accident I had was when I fell off a ladder. And I fell 4 meters down to a concrete floor. And I was very lucky not to have broken a leg or worse. And I also had a serious accident. Actually, it was in Oxford with some equipment that we were making when I pointed my finger at a 100,000 volt power supply, and it jumped like lightning off the end of my finger, and that shot me. That was the second most serious accident. But radiation, never.
That sounds very interesting, because most people would not think that the most dangerous thing happening in your life is like doing nuclear physics, falling from a ladder. So that's very very contrary to public belief about the research project. So okay, so I have the last 2 questions. So the first one is like many of our audience, they're still in school, or they're like undergrad, they're still very, very young. So what's your advice for those undergrad students? And then what course of research experience should they pursue if they want to advance in your field? For example, they want to use nuclear physics to do some good to human race, or they want to make the world a better place.
In your question to me initially, you had said, what about if they want to study your field? Well, the first thing I would say is don't concentrate on a field. You want to be very broad as well as deep, and all the mathematics and stuff. We should concentrate on the ideas and try to do something in your life which is almost impossible. Now, if you try to do something that's almost impossible, it has the very good advantage that it cuts down the competition, because things are impossible frighten other people away. So you can actually achieve something if you do something impossible. But if you do something that everybody knows you can do, there are lots of other people. But the most important thing, I think, is to study more than one subject, because the interesting things in life are where different subjects meet. The most easily achieved advances are where biology and physics meet. And that is what I have been particularly concerned about, because understanding why nuclear is safe is understanding first about the radiation and the nuclear side, which physicists understand and engineers understand. And then there's what it does to you and to tissue and your cells of your body when it is irradiated. And physicists don't know anything about that, so that frightens them. But the doctors don't know anything about nuclear physics. So the energy is so huge compared with anything that they have to deal with, that they're frightened of that. And so the important thing in planning your career is to do at least 2 subjects properly, deeply, not just needlework or something, profound subjects, and study where they meet, because that is where the most interesting things are. Now, that may mean doing a second degree later in your life. But of course, if we live now to 80 and 100 years, and I'll be 80 next year, so I'm looking at this closely. If we live so long, why shouldn't we spend more time studying more subjects and looking at where the subjects join? Now, it's not just facts, but the way biology works and the way biologists think is so different to the way that physicists and engineers think. And I have had a great deal of interesting time studying another subject and realizing and coming to respect how different it is, and then seeing where the 2 subjects rub up against one another. And that is the nuclear problem. The nuclear education problem is getting people to see both sides of the effect of radiation on life.
So just as you mentioned that you suggest a student to start in one more subject rather than just doing one specific area. So do you think that as a physicist, do you think will help especially the student interested in physics, do you think that doing more work in biology will help them to understand physics better, or you think that will help them to find a joining point between these 2 disciplines, which can help their later career?
It's not a means of understanding physics better. It's studying physics in order to understand biology better as well. And I had, at Oxford, we went from having a 3-year undergraduate course in physics to 4 years. And same thing happened at Cambridge 20 years ago. And so I started doing an optional course on applications of nuclear physics. Well, I thought, that's okay, I know about that. And so I worked it up and gave some lectures and then expanded it. And I got into medical physics, and I got into working with some of my former students who were then looking at brain imaging and things like that. And I had taught them and they taught me. And so it moved out from that, and I ended up by giving a course on medical physics and writing a book on it with all the mathematics to do with the reconstructing of the images in PET scans and MRI and so on, and exactly what all the physics is going on. And it was when I'd done that that I gave a lecture to old members of the college when they came along, and they said for an alumni weekend, and I lectured, and I said, nuclear is so interesting and it does so much for you, for your health. Why don't you realize what it can do for the planet? And of course, they didn't know. And it wasn't that difficult to explain to them. And I gave that lecture in 2006. So I've been on this, working on this for 14 years. So that's what I've been doing. And why am I optimistic? Well, just this last week, Zion Lights, who was one of the movers of Extinction Rebellion, has come out now in support of nuclear energy. And she rang me up and we had a long conversation, and there was a lot of collaboration going on with people who are thinking about the environment but have got the wrong idea. But because they're thinking, we can get there. It's people whose minds are closed you can't do anything with. And then also this week, I had an email from somebody at the IAEA in Vienna, and he said, I like what you're doing. And my next statement is, of course, I want to throw away most of the regulations that you make. But he got hold of me. So between all these things, if we talk to one another and learn from one another, we can get there.
So, okay, I don't think I have any question anymore, but I just want to ask you one more question. So,
Yes.
out of my personal curiosity, or so what will you? So, for the next few years, will you devote more your time and educate the public, or you will more focus on your writing? So, or both.
I hope to do both. I'm secretary of the Supporters of Nuclear Energy, which is a UK business, but we've got lots of people from abroad. These things are completely international now, and because of occasions like this, with Zoom, we talk to people around the world. So there's lots of communication between people, between doctors and biologists, people who know much more than I do about that side, and other people, people who were in their younger days were in the nuclear testing zones in the United States, and they have personal memories from their families and so on. I've been to Fukushima 4 times and meet people there, and I've been to Australia and talked there. And because nuclear is not a US-owned piece of science, this belongs to everybody. It's natural science. It belongs to everybody. And if we're going to mitigate climate change, we're not going to stop it, but we're going to stop it getting too much worse. We're going to have nuclear energy for everybody.
I feel I have learned a lot by talking to you today, and I really want to thank you for coming to our show.